Welcome to another episode of Shift with Elena Agar. In this conversation, I was inspired by Joyce Kyles. She's a speaker and author and leadership consultant who has a really thoughtful approach to both personal and professional development. She also has a couple of books. One of them is What Colors Your Elephant, that really helps us understand the self-awareness piece of us and making us pause and think about what is it that we're looking for, what do we want, what are some things we need to address in our own lives, and those elephants in the room that she calls them, that we need to really face in order for us to be at our top best. I really found it just refreshing and inspiring to just take a pause, and with everything that's going on in the world and all the chaos and all the the hustle mode and all the things that we go through, to just take a moment and just really think strategically and thoughtfully about ourselves, our lives, and what's next. So I found it inspiring. I think you will too. Check it out, and as always, like, subscribe, and come back for more. Joyce, welcome to the Shift Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I have in front of me your two books that you sent me that we're going to dive a little bit deeper on for people who are watching. And first of all, thank you for sending these, because I love the personal touch. I love like the whole thing, and I loved going through them. They made me think about things that I don't typically think about on every, like, you know what I mean? Like, it really gave me a pause when it comes to,
Okay.
like, especially the elephant in the room. So we'll talk about all of that, but these books are
Okay.
amazing. And as we kind of talk about them, I'll make sure to link them for people who are interested really in that essentially just personal and professional development. And I think they're just so practical, and there's so many notes and reflections that one can take. So I just wanted to just give you props for this, because they're very,
Thank you.
very thoughtfully put together books that just make you really think twice about life and how we operate, the elephants in the room, which we'll talk about, and so on. So it's so yeah, thank you for these.
Oh, thank you
um
so much.
Before we dive into the kind of the work that you do, the books, and the mission that you have in life, give my audience a little bit of a snapshot of who is Joyce and what brought you to write books on personal development.
Okay. Well, first of all, again, thank you so much for having me. I was thinking about, as was preparing for our time together today, like who is Joyce and how did Joyce get started with all of this? And what I realized is that while I have been writing and journaling and speaking and teaching for a number of years on a professional level, I actually started this when I was 12. um, and even further back, probably 8 or 9 with writing. I was encouraged by an elementary school teacher who encouraged me to write my feelings. And it was a way to release and outlet, everything that was happening that made me happy and brought me joy. I would write about it. If there was things that were going on that, made me sad or was disappointed about in growing up, I wrote about those things too. And as I came into my own, with living in life as we go through it, I started recognizing that, yeah, this is someone who's always been a part of me, like writing and journaling and speaking has always been a part of me. And so why not put this together in a business form? Because I was doing it for free. I was doing it because I loved it. I was doing it because it's my passion and my purpose, and helping others to heal and to process, things that were going on around them. Sometimes I would look and talk with people, and their situations may seem really grim. And I was able to show them through professional, credentialing as well as personal lived experiences that there are ways to transition and transform and thrive. And so again, I've been doing this forever, and it just seems natural for me to go down this path. By the time I was 14, I was actually teaching my church congregation. So I always spoke at Sunday worship during Sunday school before the pastor would speak, literally before the age of computers and being able to text and type and all the things and whiteboards. I was literally writing out lessons on a blackboard and teaching the congregation. So it's just natural that this would be the path that I would take.
Yeah, and it really comes through your work because you can see that it's very personal. It's very th like I mentioned in the beginning, like it's very thoughtful in terms of like all the different things you ask the reader to think about and the questions you ask throughout the book and the workbook itself. And I think that's the hard part is asking those questions and or answering those questions more,
Mhm.
right? And I
Mhm.
and I like it because it's not like I mean I love books in general. I think there's different types of books, and then there's those books that kind of just you read and they inspire you and you kind of just take what you want from it. And then there's books like yours that are actual workbooks where you actually work through some of the things, and I think that's very practical, and that's what I feel like we need more and more in this world today. We have so much information coming in, and we want to be better and we want to be grow as people, but then it's like, do we ever pause and take time to answer the questions that are there?
Yes.
That's the hard, that's why I like
Yes.
the book. Yeah.
Thank you. And that was the intent with both of them, is to not just do the hard work, but the heart work as well, and I say all the time that I wrote these books, but as we grow and mature and life's, circumstances change for us, sometimes, the ebbs and flows of life, then what applies to me in a particular season may not apply later, and so one of the things that I've really enjoyed about writing both of the books is that where we are right now may not be where we are later, and it gives you an opportunity to be able to write and to pivot and to change. I don't say erase. And when I write things down, when we talk about like checklists, for instance, if you've accomplished a particular goal on your list, I always encourage people to draw a line through it, but not erase it, because I want you to celebrate what you've accomplished. And then you may need to go back and reference it in case something comes up in your life's journey that, you know what, this sounds familiar to me. What did I do in that situation? What did I do in this instance? How did I show up for myself? How did I show up for someone else? Or maybe how I didn't. And then what could I do differently so that the outcome is better?
Hmm. One of the books is called "What Color Is Your Elephant?" Talk to me a little bit about that. Everybody knows the elephant in the room kind of saying, right? But you take, and
Right.
I was wondering, I was like, as you started, I started, I was like, I wonder where she's going with this. I was like, oh, I was like, this is good. So tell us a little bit more about what is the elephant that you're referring to in this book and why it's important.
Sure. Sure. I loved doing that. Like, I really enjoyed writing it, because we always, like you said, we always talk about the elephant in the room, right? That we hear that all the time. What we don't always talk about, though, is how the elephant got there in the first place. And I think that it's important that we truly examine, what colors our elephants cause to play on the colors and our personalities and personality types. And while that may play a part in why the elephant shows up, there's other reasons that we have internal elephants that we need to examine. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. And that's one of the things that I talk about in the book is the beauty of elephants. Like when we think of elephants, a lot of times we think of them as these big, gray, not so attractive types of animals when they're actually really beautiful and cultured. Like if you really take a moment to step back and study the elephant and the way that it carries itself and the way that it nurtures, their birthing process. It is just, it's fascinating. So I won't spend a lot of time in that, but I really loved learning about elephants. And what I find is that we don't spend enough time doing introspection, and we're afraid to. A lot of
Mm.
times we don't want to confront what we experience, what we see. We don't necessarily like I don't like to say ugly parts of ourselves, but the parts that are not quite as attractive, I will say it that way. And so we tend to just ignore it or put it to the side. We push it to the side. And then it shows up in other ways. And sometimes it's in our workspaces. Sometimes it's in our home environment or, where we may frequent for recreational activities or where we worship, those types of things. So I was really intentional about us exploring the outer elephant and how we can help. our, coworkers, our friends, our family members, to address the elephant that's obvious to everyone, but no one wants to talk about it. And then what does courage and courageous and candid conversations look like to address the outer elephant? But then doing that really, again, hard and hard work within ourselves to determine, if I'm the elephant and I know I'm the elephant, how did I get here? And what can I do for me to help me to grow and to pivot and to change and to evolve so that the elephant doesn't exist? And then finding beauty in that elephant. And I talk a lot about grace. We all have them. We all have biases. We all have um, different lived experiences, personal experiences that we have gone through, some good, some not so much. And they tend to show up in who we are and how we live. And so, but there's beauty and to be learned in all those experiences, right? So that's what it's about. That's where it came from, and I started with myself. Those who know me well know that I am pretty transparent individual, and that helped to write the book as well because people are able to see themselves and go, okay, well, I can relate to that.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's so important, to have that moment for that introspection, right? Like that self-awareness. And I think to your point, there are two parts to self-awareness. One is the self-awareness, but then the external self-awareness, which is how we're viewed by other people. So, and I think that both sides are very, very important because sometimes what we think and how we show up is like what we think about ourselves, and then how other people perceive us based on our actions and communication is different actually,
Right.
right? And that, in the workplace, that can definitely cause some disruption. I'm curious, there's a lot of talk in the workplace around performance and a lot and around, how do we become like more productive, right? With all the AI, all the things that are happening, like just how do we do more or with less or better with less, and in your work with leadership, what do you see other, the biggest challenges to that high performance in the workplaces today?
Wow. A couple of things. So I would say the top two is around wellness for one, and then active listening. So I'll start with the active listening piece first. With active listening, oftentimes what I'm seeing and hearing is that individuals find that their leadership tends to listen to be understood versus listening for understanding. And that makes the employees not feel seen, heard, or valued. And of course, that leads to individuals not feeling appreciated and, they're starting to look for other employment. They begin to check out, so to speak. And they're planning this exit when they very well may be wonderful employees, but we're not listening to their fears, their concerns. I also talk a lot about trauma informed care and trauma informed leadership. What does it look like to lead with empathy, with understanding, with doing a deeper dive into the relationships between, what's going on at work versus what's going on at home, and and with life happening and things going on in our society. I think it's important that we listen to our employees and then we listen to ourselves as leaders, right? We need to listen to ourselves and recognize that, I often tell people we wear these capes and I say, take those capes and burn them. You can't do all the things and you can't be all things to all people, which kind of leads over into the wellness piece of what I see as a barrier. We collectively have not spent enough time with implementing sustainable, and I want to emphasize the word sustainable wellness strategies. We'll do things that will feel good in the moment, but not necessarily implement them as a lifestyle in a way of our lives in our workspaces as part of the culture, right? So when we think about wellness, a lot of times we'll think of self-care. And there are some commonalities in the self-care and wellness, but wellness is a deeper dive. And so when we often think of self-care, first thing we think of usually is something physical. We're getting manicures and pedicures, or we're spending a day by the beach. And those things are great. But when it's not consistent and it's not communicated in a way that says this is mandatory that you do this, then we burn out and we lose good employees. We tend to leave our employers when we find that those things around wellness are not being achieved, they're not being heard. And when we're saying we're tired, you're hearing people say that they're tired. Ask them why. What is it about our work environment that may be causing you to be tired? And then you start finding out that there are other things that, people are afraid of losing their jobs. You mentioned AI, and there's this fear that AI is taking over everyone's jobs. Um, when you have to concern yourself with how to pay bills and what does that look like for you and your family. If you're a caregiver, maybe your employer doesn't even know any of these things. And again, those are barriers that I'm seeing and hearing from those in leadership as well as those who work, in spaces for others. They just want to be seen, heard, and appreciated. They want to feel human, and they want their leadership to recognize them as humans.
Hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate the impact that uncertainty and fear has on like a mental toll. Because when you're continuously, like, even if you're employed right now and everything is fine, there's this, like, in the back of, I feel, a lot of people's heads in different industries. I mean, like, every day I see, like, companies cutting costs and cutting staff and so on. And I think, I try to minimize my exposure to this, but or it's like another industry that goes towards, I don't know, more AI tools versus the human side, right? And I think every time you see some of these things, and it depends how much you expose yourself to it, it's like you always fed this information from the outside world, from the media, from the conversations, from the news, and so on, that you could be next. And that
Absolutely.
mental exhaustion of always thinking, is my time coming? Am I next to be cut? Am I next for my business to go out of business? Am I next for this layoff? Am I next, etc. And I don't even think people realize how much subconsciously it all just sits in the back of our minds, and then we're just overwhelmed and anxious all the time. It's
Right,
wild, and then at
right.
the same time, we're supposed to show up at work and act like everything is fine. And, like, what? It's exhausting.
Yes, 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 very much so. And, as a Black woman, um, if you've watched the news or heard anything along the lines of statistics, where we're concerned, in the last 5 to 6 months now, more than 300,000 Black women have been displaced. And it is, as you said, it's wild. It is unimaginable. And as a Black woman, I feel that. And I have conversations with other women of all walks, but certainly those that look like me,
Mm,
who express all of what you just shared, that it is a fear. So for those who may still be gainfully employed, there is a real fear that, what, next week could be it for me. This week could be it for me. I can leave here, work Friday and not return. And that is a real genuine fear. And it does it plays on you physically, which impacts the other parts of us too, our ability to show up socially, environmentally, spiritually, intellectually, financially, all the parts of wellness. So then that's why I said that it's, for me, self-care is wonderful and all the things, but I really focus a lot on wellness because it focuses on the whole person. When we think about self-care and all those tangible pieces, well, if income is a concern for you, then going to get that weekly massage might not be in the cards for you. So
mhm,
then you don't want to stress about that. What can you do as an alternative that still speaks to your wellness, and gives you what you need, and it relaxes your mind, your body, and your spirit? So what does that
mhm.
look like?
Yeah. If somebody who is in HR roles or talent roles or even like leader in a company listening to this and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't even think that my people are going through this, but they might be. Like, how can they support their employees at this time? Like, what are some things that are helpful for that maybe some companies do well and some companies completely miss the mark?
So I will say that I worked for an employer once that did not value the fact that I verbalized that I was tired, um, because I was. And instead, I was told that I was a great employee. And, that's why everyone gravitates to you, for you to keep doing what it is that you're doing. And it stressed me out and I left. Eventually, though, they got new management, and the new manager, um, she implemented weekly check-ins where you had to take off work. You are mandated each week to take off. I think it's a half day of work. It might be a whole day at this point. I'm not sure because it's been some time ago now. But I just loved hearing that, yes, someone came in and saw this is a real problem, especially if you're in social work, and working in those healthcare spaces. But honestly, any space, it matters not. People are just people and we get tired. Our bodies they just get
Yeah.
tired. Even if you're doing something you enjoy, at some point in time, it's like, okay, you need to step back. So I would say that it's important for those who are in HR to examine their SOPs, to examine when's the last time you've had a retreat. And a retreat does not have to be a big elaborate, we're going over to Costa Rica for a week and that kind of, that's
That
ideal,
would be
it's
nice
wonderful.
though.
Yes, it would. But what does it look like to have a
Mm,
retreat in-house? What does it look like to even have something if everyone works in other spaces? Is it possible to just bring everyone together for a Zoom and do something fun, something culturally fun? When is the last time
mm,
maybe you have actually done a survey with your staff to ask what their needs are? Sometimes
yeah.
it's just in the asking, and I think that's a huge one. Just ask. We don't ask enough. So again, it's that thing of listening for understanding versus listening to be understood. And I think if we do those things, those are just some things to get you started to thinking about.
Yeah.
We could have a retreat. We could do something small. We could do something simple. We can, just ask questions, get those surveys in, and then start creating environments that are welcoming and creating environments that allow for people to be seen, heard, and recognized for their work. One of the things that I have talked about also is gamification. That's something else that can be implemented that encourages fun environment and more engagement. I just think it's important to just kind of, go outside the box a little bit and not do the things that we typically do. Because if you want different results, you have to do something different because the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah. And the very practical one of the very practical things that you said is just ask your employees what they want, and sometimes like I mean I've heard of companies that they just give a day off to everybody. They're like, listen, this Friday was just a day off, take it, and as long as you don't have like you're not answering to clients 24 hours a day and so on, if it's feasible for you to take a day off as a company, do it. I mean I
Yeah.
forgot which I think LinkedIn, yeah, LinkedIn is one of the companies because I have some people that work there
Mhm.
and they take a full week, the whole company takes the full week off and then they do like whatever they do. It's like a retreat. I mean, obviously LinkedIn is huge, so they have the budgets and so on, but it's like how can you, to your point, like what can you do at your scale as a company that could
Right.
really make a difference? Those little small things that would actually, go a long way with employees.
Absolutely, absolutely. I actually worked for a company that the month of December, the whole company just closes its doors at least the last 3 weeks of December, and they don't come
Wow.
back until the first week in January. So
Mm.
that was really nice, and everyone was paid for
Mm-hmm.
that time off. So it encourages you come back, you're refreshed, you're ready to go, because you have an employer that makes you feel valuable. And that was just one thing. There were a few things that she would do even throughout the year, but certainly you knew that when December came, about mid-December until the 1st of January, how nice is it to know that, yeah, for nearly a month, I am off work with pay, able to
Mm-hmm.
go and do what I need to do. And then there were bonuses, so
Mm-hmm.
again, it's that thing of doing what you can do within the scope of your business, your networking. LinkedIn is huge. So of course they'll be able to do some things that maybe some smaller businesses cannot, but operate in the space that you can operate in. It's all appreciated. And not just for the employees, but for you as a leader. You know,
Yeah.
you feel good about knowing that you have listened to your employees and taking time for yourself, because that takes the stress off of them, which in turn takes the stress off of you as the leader.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of just like shutting down shop for a little while and maybe 3 weeks for people who listen to like, okay, this is extreme. And yeah, it may work in certain capacity, but I think a week
Right.
is like solid. Like close the last week of December, like that Christmas week. Because honestly, Joyce, like who actually works? Like, let's be real. Like I feel like after like December 10th, after Thanksgiving, let alone December 10th, I mean like literally like
Yes,
every email you sent out, you're like, can we revisit in early next year? Like it becomes next year's problem. So let's stop lying
yes,
to ourselves and saying that anybody works in the last week of December, unless you have certain maybe very few roles out there. But the reality is like literally, even if they're online or they're showing up, people are checked out mentally. But you know what
right,
does work to your point? Like if they just take that week off and because the company gave it to them, they will come back so much more productive and just, ready to go, like guns blazing,
right.
ready to go in January, and they will make up for whatever you think you might have lost as a company in that
Yes,
week, whatever you
absolutely.
imaginary things you think you might have lost. Again, of course, there are exceptions, but I think a lot of companies out there, you're going to be all right if you just take a week off. And I think it's
Agreed.
going to add so much to the culture of the company and and just the vibe overall. So I like
Mhm.
that.
I agree. I agree. I agree.
Yeah, and then so there's, I always see things as, there are two responsible parties. I think there's the organization, the HR, and the leadership that have a role to play. But then there's also the employee, because a lot of the reasons that we show up exhausted and burnt out and so on is because we also don't take the necessary steps to take ownership of what we do outside of work, right? Like even though we spend a lot of time, but there's certain things that we could probably do differently on individual level to add to our overall wellness. So, like, what are some of those things that could be helpful and practical for people?
I often tell people to be honest with yourself, to be honest with your employer. If you have a huge caseload, express that. If you have become a caregiver, if you're not feeling well, maybe, there are some other challenges that may be going on around you, but be honest and say that, because, you know, a lot of times, unfortunately, employees will blame the employer without taking accountability and action themselves.
Hmm.
And they'll say, well, my employer is doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, but have you talked with your employer? Have you made your concerns known, or did you keep it to yourself? And if so, then why? That kind of goes back to the what color is your elephant in those pieces that I talk about in there. So there's a sense of accountability and action that as an employee that we must take, and then be willing to stand on that too, and not be afraid. Don't be afraid to have those candid conversations. Practice in the mirror before you go and talk to your employer if you need to, or write it down, or schedule, hey, I need to schedule some time to talk with you. Another thing is not taking advantage of services that may be available to you, such as EAP, for instance. If you're needing to talk with someone because you're having stressors, there's stressors in your life, whether they're, related to work or home or what have you. A lot of companies do have EAP programs where, the employee can go and talk with a professional about what they're experiencing and feeling. Another thing is making sure that you've taken advantage of all the tools and resources that your company may have to offer. So check if you're wanting to go back to school or if you're needing additional certifications or credentials. Have you taken the time to look at your company's website? When's the last time you actually looked at it? Because a lot of us, once you've gotten onboarded to the job, you don't go back and look at, you're not going back looking at SOPs.
Definitely
We're not
not.
going back going and looking at, the website to see what's actually on there. Hey, we got the job, we got hired,
Hmm. Yeah.
so we don't do any of that. So my thing is, go back and check and see. There may be a program that's available to you to get additional education. Maybe you're wanting to go back and get your master's or a particular certification that would help you to advance at your job.
Mm.
The company may pay for it, but you don't know that until you've actually done your due diligence and your research. So those would be some things that I would say definitely from a employee perspective to consider
Mm.
when before we get mad at the employer. Let's do some introspection and see how much of it is me and how much of it is potentially them.
Yeah, and this is where I think the other book that you have, the Create Yourself book, really comes in handy because it really goes into that ownership of your career and life in general, and like taking time to figure out what is it that you're trying to do? How are you going to get there? Like setting some of those goals and like actually working through them. And I think a lot of people in organizations today, at least as we know, but through reports and so on, that they're disengaged. And a lot of that disengagement is because people are doing things they don't like. Like they just don't like, but then they're like just feel stuck in this job. And I think, of course, to each his own, but I think that, for some people, it might take you a year to make a change. For some people, it might take 2 months. For some people, it might take 5 years. But not doing anything, I think, is hurting a lot of people. And this is where I like the second book that you have, this one for people who are reading, I mean, watching this, because it really goes into like actual, like, how can I achieve X, Y, and Z? Like, who can help me? What resources do I have at my disposal, right? And to your point, then like a lot of people just don't even know what's available to them, right? Like in an organization, that's because nobody reads the HR emails when they send out about the employee assistance programs, the EAPs, or budgets that are available for your continuing education and so on. And I think
Yes,
there is some responsibility that an employee has to take as well. So yeah, I think your book, I'm definitely going to link both of these books because I think they're just so practical about everything that we're talking about. Even if you're like listening to this, you're an HR leader, I think
yes,
it's for everybody. It's
yes.
just being better, like for our own selves. So it's
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that because that was again with both of them, the intent, it was very intentional that I focused on ensuring that no matter what space you work in, what space you operate in, no matter where you are in your journey, there would be something that you could pull from it and be able to work it and go back and look at it and say, you know what? Okay, this worked for me. Let me continue this, or no, I may need to pivot here. So with Create Yourself, it's imagery, intimacy, innovation. And again, because I am a transparent person, I really think it's important to be that way so that people can see and know, understand, okay, she gets it, she understands, this is my experience, or something along those lines resonates with you. And so each one of those eyes, the innovation, the intimacy, the imagery, each one talks about it from a personal perspective as well as a professional one. And one thing that I encourage in each one of those books is you're able to read information and then there's assignments. There are things for you to work through in each book. I also encourage you to celebrate yourself because we don't do that enough. We spend
Mhm.
so much time on, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, I'll get to it, or I've got to take care of everyone else, or I've gotten this done. Now it's off to the next thing. When we don't, as you said, I love the way that you framed that about pausing. We don't just pause and break. We don't just take a moment to step back and go, you know what? I accomplished that. I
Mm.
achieved this. And that's worth celebrating. Whether that means I'm celebrating with ice cream, which is, one of the things I like, and all things chocolate, or if that's, taking a weekend for myself, whatever that looks like. I bought a new dress because I lost a few pounds, whatever
Mhm.
that looks like at work. That's why I mentioned the piece about the gamification, because I do talk about that too and share that in the books, as well as just in my speaking and training and facilitating. I talk with HR professionals on how to incorporate gamification into their work environments, because I just think it's so important to celebrate ourselves, and it's important for you to celebrate those who work for you as well.
Mm.
Again, that thing of being able to be seen and heard and validated, that what you're doing has value. I matter to this company. And that's on all levels, even in leadership. You matter to those who hired you, but you should also celebrate yourself and create innovative ways to make that happen, so that not just you, but also those that you work with and for transition, transform, and thrive. And I always say transition, transform, and thrive together.
I like it. No, it's beautiful, and I think again, these kind of conversations are going to become more and more important as we're getting faster and faster, faster, and we don't take that pause. And I think there's so much what's the word I'm looking for, like so much richness to take in that pause, because I think, and I'm only reflecting on this because I feel like I'm also going, and your books really made me like, wait a minute, like where am I actually running to? And I'm usually really good and introspective. So like if I'm saying this, it's probably a good thing, but imagine like people who don't ever pause, like, so it's yeah, I think it's just, yeah, and I think we could just collectively just do better, as leaders and organizations, as people who take ownership of our own development. I think we've picked up this like blame game mentality in a lot of cases, this kind of victimhood mentality, but really we need to just, again, take some of that power and control back and say, what can I
Yes.
focus on that can help me, right? And I think we can all do better with that, myself included. So I think it's there's a beautiful reminders that your book really brought out in my own mind. So thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I definitely agree. Many, many years ago, I was in a support group, so peer support group. And the facilitator asked me, I think we'd gone through a series of questions about whatever the particular topic was at the time, but I know it was centered around me being one of those people who's always moving, going, moving, moving, moving. As I at that point, I was fully into speaking and facilitating, and started a nonprofit, which I held for years. And I was just always going and doing, right? And she asked me, have you ever thought what it would be like for you to just be still and stop moving? What would you do with yourself? And I've thought and it's exactly what I did. Like, I don't know, because I had just become so accustomed to always going and doing and moving, and sometimes we need to just be still, sit with ourselves, sit with our accomplishments, sit with the things that we may need to pivot and change. Because if we're always moving, there's no time to actually stop and take advantage of celebration or things that may be concerning. People who have experienced different illnesses, sometimes, they'll share that by the time they've gotten to the doctor, it's at stage 3, and it's because they decided, well, I'll get to me later. I'll get to the doctor. I'll get to the doctor. I'm thinking of someone that I love and care about very much, who I have been fussing at about this very thing. Stop and go to the doctor. It's okay. The world is going to continue moving,
Mm.
whether you are a part of it or you're laying under it. Because if you're not still and take care of yourself, you will be laying under it. There were two women when I went to speak at an event that was related to domestic violence. And these two women had come up, and apparently they hadn't seen each other in a long time. And one had said, "Oh, it's so good to see you. And, how have you been?" And the other one said, "Yes, it's good to see you too. It's always better to be seen than viewed."
Hmm.
And I thought, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
so just constantly moving, going, going, going. Sometimes we have to
Mm,
stop. When last thing I'll say on that is when my dad passed away. It's been 21 years away, 21 years ago now. But when he made his earthly transition, the funeral was over, gone to bed. Maybe a couple of days had passed. My daughter came into my room. Had to be 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, over in the night, and she says, "Mom, Granddad came to visit me, and he told me to tell you that the reason that you don't hear him is because you don't stop moving. He
mm.
told me to ask you to be still." And then she just got up off the bed and walked right back into her room and got back in the bed.
Were you just
So
there
when,
like, what? How
yes,
old
did
was she, first of all?
let's see. Oh, wow. Has it been that long? 12? 12.
Just wow.
Yeah.
What was
Wow.
your reaction?
Um,
Just shock? Like,
it
if you
was.
remember. Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, very much so. I sat there and I thought, did she just come in here and say this, you know? And then, but what it made me do though is it caused me to reflect on everything that was going on around me at the time too. And she was absolutely right. And if I am to believe that what she believed was truly his voice and his spirit in her, then I believe him. Because when you said that, the books are practical and they are based on my experiences, they are based on things that I have gone through or other people have shared with me. And so, what does it mean to transition, transform, and thrive? What does it look like to pay attention to the elephant in the room? Because the elephant in the room at one point was me. And no one wanted to say to me what needed to be said. And I knew it, they knew it, but no one said anything.
Mm,
And it's like once someone finally broke the ice and said, hey, X, Y, and Z, then released, there was some release there, but it was also some other concerns that arose as a result because we needed to get to the root causes of why some things were happening the way that they were. So, yeah, I remember it very, very well, but I'm so thankful for it because I do reflect and I think about that often now that, yeah,
mm,
I needed to just be still. So I am very intentional about pausing.
mm. And you mentioned something interesting is that a lot of times people around us see what's going on, but they don't share that.
Mhm.
And why do you think that is? And and if somebody's listening to this and they're like, actually, I know somebody and I know what's going on, and I want to point it out, but I don't. Like, I guess, how do you gently point things out to people? Because I think that maybe that's my guess. Maybe people just feel uncomfortable to pointing out the elephants in the room. But what do you think can help in that case?
Depends on the situation. But the word that you used when you said gently, I think
Mm-hmm.
is key across the board. I think you have to know how to read the room, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
um, and know what to say and when to say and how to say. And that's a skill. It takes time. And so what I would suggest though is if it's something that is like in a case of say someone who is being abused in that instance because it shows up at work just like it would anywhere else, then those conversations, while they need to be handled gently, but they do need to be handled expeditiously, in that there needs to be information available, resources available, encouragement available. I think a lot of times that people don't say anything, whether it's abuse related or workplace environments, toxic environments at work, what have you. We're afraid to. We're afraid to because there's a judgment, there's a bias, there is this belief that, nothing can hurt him, nothing can hurt her because she's always showing up strong. He's always showing up strong. He's always Mr. Dependable. He can fix anything. So when we see someone, though, that appears to be so strong and so healthy and so capable, we never stop to consider that they too may be hurting, and this is how it's showing up. It's showing up as an overachiever. It's showing up as I am being belligerent to my employees and I'm screaming at them and yelling at them. And there may be something internal that's going on that has nothing to do with you. But we have to be brave and have those courageous conversations that says, we need an intervention. We need a coffee day. We need to write some things out. We need a secret ballot box, anonymous something. We need something that says, step in. Um, and then also, the truth of the matter is recognizing that even if you show up and you do all the things, understanding and recognizing that we still may not be able to help everyone in the ways that we desire, even if we're showing up, even if we're saying, hey, I'm here to support, I love you, I care about you, you're valuable to the company. Case in point, a young lady who I got a chance to know briefly that I just absolutely fell in love with, and her name is Chesley Christ. Chesley Christ was Miss USA 2019, and at the age of 30, she died by suicide. And to know Chesley, beautiful, beautiful young lady. I mean,
Mm,
beautiful inside and out. I mean, she's a beauty pageant winner. She's, top 10 Miss Universe. But at 30, that was the course that she took. And I had an opportunity to meet her mom last year. So that really helped me personally and brought things full circle for me, um, to recognize and hear and know that her mom loved her dearly. They had a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful relationship. But recognizing that as much as she did to try to be there for her, then, it still was not enough. So I just want to encourage people to know that give yourself grace. Give the individuals that you are working with and working for, give them grace too. I think that is a wellness attribute that we all need to have in all of our spaces, is to give ourselves grace and give others grace too, because you just don't know who's dealing with what. Um, but you can make your environment fun and engaging and make people comfortable, because the other part of why, people may not talk or share or open up is the fear of judgment. And that's a very real thing.
mm,
Because people think we are a certain way, we won't talk to them, we don't share, we don't open up, and we don't want people to think, we don't want to let them down, when in actuality we're hurting ourselves. And so, I often tell people that saying no, the word no is a complete sentence and it requires no explanation, just no. But when you say no to someone else, you're saying yes to you. And I hope that as people who, are listening to us in this discussion today, that they take away what grace looks like, what it means to say no, what it means to say yes, what it means to really look at your own biases. And because, oh, I don't have a bias. Yes, you do. We all do. We all do. Now, we work on them, and we work on them to ensure that they don't show up as much as possible. But it's who we are. It's how we were raised. It's the environments that we're in. They create
mm,
these things for us, right? So I would say definitely, if you feel that there's something going on or there's an elephant in the room, if you're the employer or the employee, don't be afraid to address it. But as employers, we have to create environments that make people feel comfortable, when it comes to sharing. We don't want to feel like if we say something about this particular elephant that our job is suddenly going to be in jeopardy. Because then, it leads to what you say. We just work, work, work. We're just doing, doing, doing. And we're in places that we absolutely hate as a result, when maybe if we just opened our mouths and said something, it may change the whole environment, the whole culture of the organization. Because if you're feeling it, chances are someone else is feeling it too. But somebody's got to be the brave one to point at the elephant and say, you know what, there's something going on here and we need to address it.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And if somebody's listening to this and they want to get in touch with you and just find out a little bit more about your work or get the books, what's the best place for you?
So the best place to reach out to me, a best to, is my website, which is joycekyles.com. and LinkedIn. That is where I live the most socially, is on LinkedIn, and it's just my name, Joyce Kyles. I'm also on other social platforms, Instagram, Facebook, new to TikTok, but I'm there as well. And it's everything, though, everywhere to find me is by just simply putting in my name of Joyce Kyles. You can pull me up that way.
Beautiful. Joyce, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It has been a blast. Thank you.